Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the first Hellenic conference on early language learning with the theme First Steps to Multilingualism, the Greek program of English for young learners. My name, as Professor Dendrino said, is Kia Karavas. Most of you will know me. And I have had the great pleasure and the great honor to be a part of this project in the capacity of a scientific coordinator of the teacher training program. Today, I won't focus exclusively on the teacher training program, but rather on the project as a whole, and I will discuss the innovatory features of this project. As you can see from the title of my talk, I will be discussing the Greek program of English for young learners, or else the PAP project, from the perspective of the educational innovation literature, highlighting the multifaceted and multi-layered nature of this innovation, presenting its innovatory practices and components, as well as the unanticipated outcomes of this innovation, or else the ripple effects, as I like to call them, of this innovation. Now, before I start describing the project, I'd like to give an overview, especially to our distinguished guests, of Greece's experience with educational reform, okay? Or rather, educational reform's experience with Greece, okay? Teachers in Greece, are certainly not new to change. Educational reform is a recurrent theme in the Greek political arena, but is characterized by passing new laws and beginning reforms, but not carrying them on to implementation. The plethora of reforms introduced have failed to make a real impact on the quality and efficiency of the system and on the performance of the students, according to a recent OECD report. And according to Gouvias 207, the reason for this is a centralized administrative structure of the Greek educational system. This structure of the Greek educational system tends to resemble administrative strangulation and unbearable inertia and does not leave any space for initiatives thus promoting uniformity and subjugation. Curricular reforms then in Greece are usually, in the vast majority of cases, top-down, and they use or follow power coercive strategies of innovation. What are these strategies? These strategies are adopted by decision makers who, by virtue of their position and status, exercise their power to promote change. As a result, change is forced on teachers who are consumers of innovation products and passive recipients of ideas and decisions taken by others high in the decision-making hierarchy. So this is a kind of overview of educational reform in Greece. Now I'll be talking, I would like to discuss the PAP program. The PAP program is certainly an innovation since it encompasses all the defining critical features of an innovation. If we take Marquis' definition of an educational innovation, according to Marquis, curricular innovation is a managed process of development whose principal products are teaching and/or testing materials, methodological skills, pedagogical values that are perceived as new by adopters. Now, on the basis of this definition, certainly the PAP project is an educational innovation since it involved the development of a curricular framework for the first and second grade of primary schools, the a posteriori development of syllabi for the first and second grade of primary schools, and the design and development of new teaching materials and learning experience for the first and second grade of primary school. The project now was indeed very novel, and the whole curriculum development process was an innovation for the Greek educational context. Following now a bottom-up model of curriculum development, at the launch of the project, the basic principles of language learning, pedagogy, and methodology that would be informing the curriculum, or that would be that would be the main accents, the main pillars of the curriculum, were identified. On the basis of these principles, the goals of the curriculum were drawn, which in turn acted as a guide for the development of a proto-syllabus and then a number of tasks for both grades initially of primary school, both first and second grade of primary school. Later on in the year, the Materials Development Group was formed, And this materials development group, which consisted of practicing project teachers, tested the materials, the existing materials in class, evaluated them, and also made corrections, revisions, additions. They also created new materials and tasks which were tested in their own classrooms as well. Now, the second year of the project, separate materials for the first and second grade of primary school were developed after a very rigorous process of evaluation. And these tasks, the separate tasks for the first and second grade, were actually finalized this year. Syllabi were also developed, as I said in the beginning, a posteriori, after the project materials had been developed, tried, tested, evaluated, and revised, thus reflecting the actual implemented curriculum rather than the planned one. We will have the opportunity to become familiar with the materials development process and the curriculum development process in the first parallel session tomorrow, Saturday, in the talk by Clary Kosovica, who was the coordinator of the materials development group, and Alexia Yanokopoulou, who was a central member, a practicing project teacher, and a central member of the materials development group. Now, the use, of course, of new materials does not come alone. The use of new materials also requires a unique set of methodological skills on part of the teachers and changes in teachers' personal theories given this unique group of students, the unique characteristics of this age group. As such, the PAP project can be characterized as a pedagogical primary innovation, according to Cuban and Markey. Such innovations involve changes in teachers' classroom practices, lesson content, and/or student-teacher role relationships, as well as changes in beliefs and principles. These types of innovations are by far the most difficult to implement because change has to happen at all three levels, at the level of material and content, at the level of skill and teaching technique, and also at the level of belief in theory, if the innovation is to achieve its objectives and become effectively implemented. Now, the PAP project, the Greek Young Learner project, certainly went against all odds and evolved into a successful innovation, being characterized as an example of good practice from the European Commission and being awarded the 2011 European Language Label Award. Its success is indeed commendable and even surprising, given the fact that the project did not encompass the features, the attributes of successful innovations, according to the relevant literature, and also was developed and implemented within a context of turbulence, a context of instability, a context that is certainly hostile to any attempt at innovation. I'd like to present this overall context in which the project was developed and evolved, since innovations, as we all know, are by their very nature defined by the context in which they are introduced. An important part of an understanding an innovation is that change to social practice and the measure of value are inherently context specific. In other words, each element of an innovation is defined by the context within which it is practiced. The novelty, the change in practice, and the perception of value of any innovation are all context specific. Now, what does this mean? This means that if you want to really judge the success of an innovation, the effectiveness in an innovation, and the impact, if you like, or even the failure of an innovation, you do this in relation to and on the basis of the context in which it has been developed. So what was this context? Well, the PAP project was introduced and developed within the context of a multifold reform program announced by the government in 2010, affecting every level and every aspect of education under the title The Student First, the New School. This multifold reform program, of course, was accompanied by changes in public sector reforms and many other reforms. But this educational reform involved reforms in the administrative structure of the educational system, comprehensive reforms in the curricula of primary, secondary, and tertiary education, new objective criteria for the selection of school directors, school advisors, and other management personnel, as well as a strategy for system, school, and teacher evaluation, which was non-existent in Greek education up until now. Now, these reforms did not come alone. They have been accompanied by administrative public sector reforms, such as closures and mergers of primary and secondary schools all over the country. And of course, these have been accompanied by significant and drastic reductions in the numbers of teachers in an attempt to ensure optimal allocation of human resources and to improve educational efficiency, according to the government. Now, of course, this development, or this reform, if you like, the mergers and the drastic reductions in the numbers of teachers, acted as a barrier to the implementation, as an obstacle to the implementation of this project, since the number of project schools and number of project teachers from the first to the second year of project implementation changed drastically. More specifically, in 2010-11, project schools were 806, whereas the following year they rose to 960. As a result, our teaching body, our project teachers, changed by 40%. The list doesn't stop there, though, because all this has been accompanied by severe pay cuts in teacher salaries, making Greek teachers the worst paid at all levels of comparison than the OECD average, and also severe cuts in public expenditure for education. Greece is placed last in spending per student in comparison to 15 European countries, according to Bouvias. And the cherry on top was political instability. Since 2010, this avalanche of reforms in Greek education has been steered by 3 different ministers of education, making political instability yet another significant element in the landscape of educational reform in Greece. Now, we all know this, innovations need stable environments in order to be implemented. Marked social or political changes seriously disrupt reform efforts. So given this context, this wider context, it is indeed amazing how the project managed to survive and flourish within this context of social and political instability. Now, not only was the project developed within adverse and debilitating circumstances, but it did not share the attributes, the features of successful innovations either. If we take Zhao et al.'s model, 2002, a very well-known model in the innovation literature, they call it the distance and dependence model, and they have developed this in order to help us understand the potential success of an innovation through the capacity of the individual or the organization to engage with change. Now, they depict this model on a 2-axis scale. The vertical axis, where it says distance from practice, refers to the distance the innovation has from existing practice. The authors suggest that the closer the innovation is to existing practice, the easier it will be to adopt. When they refer to practice, they mean anything from practice, classroom practice, pedagogy, school culture, and structures within the school. Now, the horizontal axis refers to dependence on resources. This relates to the resources needed to implement the innovation and the extent to which these are different from existing school resources. By resources, they use a broad category referring to technical resources such as equipment or web access, human resources such as extra staff needed to help with a project, or physical resources such as special classrooms or spaces to implement the innovation. The less demand now on innovation puts on extra school resources, the easier it is to adopt. So if we kind of summarize the logic of this model, if an innovation requires significant change from teaching practice and significant increase in resources, it will need a greater amount of support to succeed than an innovation which requires fewer resources and demands little change from teachers' existing practices. Now, if we go back, you can see that PAP is in the danger zone. It's high on both axes. So according to this model, the project stood very few chances of success since it required significant change in teaching practice, there was no existing practice. The BAP project introduced a totally new component in the educational system. So there was no existing practice to improve, actually. So it's quite far from existing practice, and it was also very demanding, at least in the first 2 years of project implementation, in terms of resources. Why? Because the project was fully online. All materials, activities, tasks were online, and of course this required computer literacy skills on part of the teachers, and quite substantial for the Greek context, always technical resources. So few chances of success according to the model. However, BAP was very, very successful and did achieve its initial objectives. And I believe that the main reason for this was the way this project was managed, diffused, and shared with teachers. Case studies of successful innovations in the innovation literature have revealed the effect of two factors that facilitate innovation uptake, and these are good communications and regular flow of feedback during the process of implementation, and of course, support for the innovation. The PAP project essentially followed what we call the social interaction model of innovation. Within this model, an innovation spreads and becomes adopted through communication networks between potential adopters. In other words, within this model, social relationships are regarded as essential for successful adoption. Fostering now the development of the social infrastructure by investing in social relationships, by facilitating collaboration between teachers, and promoting cross-discipline working are seen as crucial to the success of an innovation. And as Kirkland and such have stated, a supportive atmosphere for innovation can develop both teachers' capacity for innovative practice, but also encourage them to try out new ideas and practices. From the inception of this project, from the time we started thinking about the project, its main goals, its main aims, and so on, conscious attempts were made to systematically involve teachers and other stakeholders in the curriculum development process, and also to set up efficient communication and support networks. This was done with the purpose of developing teachers and other stakeholders' ownership of this innovation, and also helping teachers contextualize this innovation against the needs, interests, resources, and purposes of the school or classroom. During the first year of project implementation, a baseline evaluation was carried out involving a series of surveys aimed at gathering information on the profile of our stakeholders. The surveys, which were administered both in print and online, opened the first communication channels with our stakeholders. The results of the surveys were absolutely essential in gathering information regarding the profile and training needs of our teachers, of our project teachers, the profile and resource capacity of our project schools, the composition and idiosyncrasies of our project classrooms. Through these baseline surveys, we were also able to indirectly gather information on our learner body. In other words, we found out what their level of competence is, their previous learning experiences, mother tongue, ethnic background, social cultural experiences. The surveys now that were carried out involved teachers, our basic stakeholder group. In the first year of project implementation, we carried out a survey of the profile of 897 teachers who completed a questionnaire distributed by school advisors and online. Also, profile data from 1,135 teachers was collected through the reports of school advisors during the teacher information seminars they organized. Headmasters now. This was our other stakeholder group. We carried out a survey of the profile of school units of project schools through an online questionnaire that was completed by 254 pilot school headmasters. And finally, parents, a very important stakeholder group. The first year of project implementation, we surveyed their attitudes and views towards a project, language learning and early language learning more specifically. And in this first year, 7,250 parents completed our questionnaire either online or in print. Now, as findings of these baseline evaluations were being analyzed, were coming out, information seminars, initially by the university project team and then by our school advisors, our training body, were given in cities and towns in Greece with a large concentration of PAP schools, of project schools. More specifically, during the first month of project implementation, 2 conferences in Athens and Thessaloniki were organized by the university project team and were attended by over 1,000 project school teachers, trainers, school advisors, and headmasters. These conferences served as a central tool for diffusing the innovation to its main stakeholders. The conference in Athens and Thessaloniki were professionally videotaped, and talk seminars were uploaded on our project site so that they could be accessible to all project teachers throughout Greece. Project information material was also developed by the project team, and was distributed to our trainer body, our school advisors, who in turn organized teacher information seminars throughout the country. At the same time, during those first conferences in Athens and Thessaloniki, open calls were made to project teachers to become members of either the materials development team or the materials evaluation team. A large number of teachers actually responded to our calls. And let's see the work of the materials evaluation group in year 1. In February 2011, the first year of project implementation, 175 project school teachers completed an evaluation questionnaire where we asked them to evaluate, critique the existing materials that we had developed. The results of this evaluation were then used by the materials development team, which consisted, as I said before, of practicing project school teachers for the revision and enrichment of the first and second grade tasks and materials. At the end of the first year of project implementation, the materials that had been developed underwent another evaluation. This time, the entire project, including all materials and tasks, was evaluated by 405 teachers throughout Greece through an online questionnaire. Now, the materials development team consisted of practicing project teachers with high qualifications of both the first and second grade of primary school. Teachers were divided into groups. Each group was headed by a leader who reported to the materials development coordinator. The process of materials development, which was indeed very intensive, very systematic and principled, was constantly informed by the results of the materials evaluation. I should say that at the end of the second year of project implementation, the materials and tasks that had been developed and already evaluated were evaluated once more through an online questionnaire completed by 577 first and second grade teachers. Apart now from the baseline studies, the conferences, and the information seminars, a basic communication and support network that we set up was through our project portal. On our portal, we had a separate space which we called the Teacher's Corner. Now, this Teacher's Corner was an online forum, actually, where project teachers could share their classroom experiences and exchange ideas about activities and classroom practices appropriate to the age group. They could upload and access teaching and learning resources appropriate for young learners of English. They could discuss their problems and seek advice. And finally, they could access information about various school events taking place throughout Greece, and share ideas and strategies for communicating relating to parents of first and second graders. So this is how we opened up our communication networks with our teachers. I should say that not only did project teachers regularly send in their work, ideas for activities, tasks and activities that they had designed and tested in class, information or videotaped classroom events, end of year events. They sent us their questions, their queries, and their critique. But they also sent us, and this was rather unexpected and very touching, they sent us personal reflective accounts of their first experience with teaching such young learners. And by permission of the authors, we have uploaded all these personal reflective accounts on our project portal. Let me just show you. This is our Teacher's Corner. It's a separate space on our portal. And the second page of the Teacher's Corner, you can see these are their suggested tasks, activities for each of the grades. Okay, and here is any information that they have sent us, videotaped or printed information about class events, end of year events, any kind of extra kind of curricula events or activities that they had staged and produced. Now, parents, or developing our communication with other stakeholders. Parents and headmasters were systematically informed about this project through letters, special letters that were written by us and distributed by school advisors, or information leaflets that we had developed. Many school advisors, members of our training group, also carried out open information seminars for parents in order to inform them about the aims, the goals of the project, the main features of the project, and also to highlight the benefits of an early start to foreign language learning, because many of our parents were quite concerned that their 7-year-old child will confuse mother tongue with the foreign language. So it was very important that our parents knew the facts. Now, apart from the information leaflets, the letters that we sent out to parents, as I said before, we conducted surveys. And it was very, very important because we wanted to see what parents' attitudes towards the project and early language learning were. We conducted 2 such surveys. One survey in the first year of project implementation, I mentioned this already, where 7,250 parents responded. In the second year of project implementation, we carried out a similar survey, and this time 790 parents completed the questionnaire online, and 10,957 parents completed the printed version. The purpose of the second administration of the survey was to gauge changes in parents' attitudes towards the project and its potential benefits from the first to the second year of project implementation. Now, the findings of these 2 projects have been published in papers in our electronic journal, BAP, which is on our portal, but you will also have a chance to become informed of the results of our parent surveys in another talk in a parallel session on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, by Doriana Nikaki and Martha Yanakaki, who have also been involved in the parent survey quite extensively. Now, it's worth mentioning that the findings of parent surveys, and especially our teachers' accounts of the difficulties they had in dealing with parents, in communicating with parents, created the need to develop a separate space on our portal dedicated to parents. The Parents' Corner, that's how we called it, the Parents' Corner has been designed with the aim to provide information and support to Greek parents whose children, of course, go to project schools, participate in the program. More specifically, this section of the portal offers insights into how parents can support their children in their first contact with a foreign language and how they can build the foundations for their children's further language development. We provide information to parents on how children learn foreign languages, how adults can assist young children who are in the process of learning a second language, and finally, how parents can support their children's language development in and through activities at home. In the Parents' Corner, we have provided parents with ideas for activities and tasks that they can complete with their children in English at home. Right, so this is how we set up the program, and this is what we paid special attention to setting up social relationships, establishing rather social relationships, and setting up efficient communication and information networks. I want to go on now to another part of the program, an integral, substantial part of the program, the teacher training program, which is very close to my heart, which I believe, without wanting to kind of blow my own trumpet, was innovatory in its development and its final form. Needless to say, I guess this is a true and say it, effective change in education is synonymous with continuous and systematic teacher education. And in cases of pedagogical, remember PAP is a primary pedagogical innovation. In cases of pedagogical innovation such as this one, teacher training is key to effective implementation of the program and its contextualization to local needs and constraints. We will have the chance to become acquainted with the challenges of developing materials for this program by the talk given by Lika Kuri and Suzanne Andonaros in the parallel sessions at noon tomorrow. Now, the training program encompass features of normative re-educative and rational empirical strategies to innovation. Now, what are these strategies and how did these figure in our teacher training program? Well, rational empirical strategies assume that individuals, that people are rational, intelligent beings, and that they will be convinced to change once they have been given information about the potential benefits or rewards of an innovation. So it's a matter of convincing, really. In normative re-educative strategies, they begin with the same assumption. They assume that human beings are intelligent and rational beings, but these strategies also recognize the fact that people's actions and behaviors are influenced by their beliefs and values. So, according to this, to these strategies towards innovation, any change in teacher knowledge or change in teacher behavior must be preceded by a change in teacher belief. First, you change beliefs, and then you attempt to change knowledge and teacher practices and skills. Now, the training program was indeed extremely challenging and very, very demanding given the wider educational context and the constraints that we faced. We knew that the training program had to be flexible in its content, capable of addressing a very diverse group of teachers with a wealth of different training needs, flexible in its content, capable of covering the needs of less, and more experienced project school teachers, and also capable of effecting change in teacher beliefs without being overly didactic and theoretical, but being grounded in examples of actual practice. It had to be flexible in its form in order to reach out to project school teachers who were located in remote areas and islands in Greece. And finally, it had to be viable and sustainable. And this was very important. This is something that we hadn't thought about at the beginning, regardless of any changes in the composition of our teaching body and our training group. I refer back to one of the developments of the reform, of the educational reform. We experienced an increase in our project schools and great differences in our project school teaching body because of this development, which acted as a barrier. So based on the results of our baseline evaluation, the needs of our school advisors and teachers, and the constraints of the wider educational context, it was decided that the training program would need to adopt a form of blended learning, including various forms and means of delivery. As a result, these are the different forms that our teacher training program has taken. We have developed an online distance education e-course. I'll tell you a bit in a second about this. We carried out face-to-face seminars. Face-to-face seminars were delivered by school advisors using materials adopted from the e-course. Another form of training was face-to-face seminars delivered by the project team and organized by school advisors using materials adopted from the e-course. Then, in order to reach out to those school advisors and teachers in remote areas and islands in Greece, we decided to set up teletraining seminars. In other words, through teleconferencing, using teleconferencing machines, and organized by school advisors. And finally, throughout Greece and throughout the 3 years of the project, we also organized one-day conferences in various parts of Greece with a large concentration of PAP schools with the help of the school advisor. So these are the many different forms that our teacher training program took. Now, through this kind of multi-form blended training program, we were able to come into close contact with our teachers. We became acquainted with our teachers, and we were able to interact with them and find out what the real issues were, what problems they faced in their classroom. This kind of multi-form blended training program also gave the opportunity to school advisors to refresh their knowledge about the project and re-examine their attitudes towards teaching very young learners, as well as their training practices. And of course, again, this multi-form blended training program also imposed the integration of ICT, both in our training and teacher professional development activities and in the teachers and school advisors training experiences as well. Now, I'd just like to very briefly go through the online e-course that we have developed. This distance learning online course is written in English and aims at raising teachers' awareness of how young learners think, how they learn language, and acquainting them with teaching practices and techniques that are appropriate for the particular age group. It consists of 6 self-contained modules focusing on various topics which have been identified on the basis of our teacher profile survey and on the basis of curricular materials. This is the first page of our online training program. Those are the 6 self-contained modules I just mentioned. The first module, I should say, the Introduction to Young Learners, which is the largest, it takes the longest, and in a sense is the most theoretical, quote unquote, is open and is open to the public. Anybody can access it in order to get a taster of the rest of the course. All modules have the same structure and have similar ways of navigation. Modules can be studied in any order and as many times as the teacher wishes. Detailed information on how to navigate is provided. And finally, all practicing public school teachers have access to the program as long as they log in and obtain a password. And the first module, as I said, is open and accessible to anybody who wants to get a glimpse of the nature and content of the training course. I should say that Ms. Papadopoulou, who was responsible for the layout, she was the brain behind the e-learning course, will be talking to us tomorrow afternoon in the parallel sessions, not so much about the e-course per se, but the possibilities that this e-course can offer in creating and sustaining communities of practice. Finally, a survey concerning the impact of the teacher training program upon project teachers' theories and practices has also been carried out very, very recently. The survey attempted to gauge the impact of teachers' involvement in the project and the impact of their training on changing their personal theories of teaching. This survey, this impact study, was expected to provide extra information and insights for the summative evaluation, not only of the training program, but of the project as a whole. And the results of this impact study will be presented by Ms. Katie Zouganelli after the coffee break on Sunday. Now, I'd like to finish off with the ripple effects of the innovation, or else the unanticipated outcomes of this innovation. The development of communities of practice. Now, school advisors at many stages of our project acted as mediators between the project team at the university and project teachers throughout Greece. This systematic communication with project teachers facilitated and encouraged the creation of communities of practice between school advisors and groups of practicing teachers. Within these communities of practice, school advisors were able to clarify the meanings of the innovation for teachers, and also these communities of practice offered a platform for teachers to experiment with new ideas, share their ideas, express their concerns and problems, and also find solutions to them. Now, we all, of course, know that through communities of practice, teachers developed a sense of ownership, a true understanding of the program and a commitment to it. And it is only when teachers become skilled and confident in using new ideas that they actually develop a sense of ownership of the new idea. Now, the work of the communities of practice will be presented in a parallel session before the lunch break on Sunday by the school advisor, Dr. Thalia Hadziyanoglu, and her group of project teachers. The work now developed through communities of practice will also be presented in our poster sessions. Poster presentations will take place on Saturday afternoon after 6. There you will have a chance to see how our project teachers, under the guidance of school advisors, have gained ownership of this innovation and how they are contextualizing it by adapting it to local constraints and needs. You will have a chance to see how our project teachers are actually becoming agents of change by participating in these communities of practice. I should say that before the closing ceremony on Sunday, we will be awarding the 3 best posters. And also, because the work of a number of school advisors is commendable in setting up this innovation, because communities of practice is an innovation for the Greek context, this is why the university project team has decided to award their efforts just before the closing ceremony on Sunday. A final ripple effect of this innovatory project, or a byproduct of this innovation, was also the development of the 3rd grade primary school textbook called Magic Book. The Magic Book, in its 2 versions, serving both project school and non-project school students respectively, serves as a bridge between this curriculum, the PAP curriculum, and the newly introduced Integrated Foreign Languages curriculum, which introduces learners to formal school literacies and aims at the development of their overall communicative competence. The authors of the Magic Books will be presenting their experiences with the materials development project on Saturday and Sunday. So Marina Mattheoudakis will be presenting the results of teachers' evaluation of the Magic Book on Saturday, while Tami Alexiou will be sharing her experience and expertise in developing Magic Books 1 and 2 on Sunday. I'd like to close by saying that this whole conference is an innovation in that it is the first national conference on primary foreign language learning in Greece and aims to present the wealth and range of products that have been developed as a result of the PAP program. As I said in the beginning, it has been a great honor and pleasure to be a member of this project team, and I very look forward to this conference, to seeing the many products that have been developed. I'm sure I will enjoy the conference. I hope you find it interesting and enjoyable as well. Thank you.